We're starting to realize, and probably have for some time, but really the importance that we take care of not just our bodies, but we take care of our minds too. So,
Bend, don't break. This is a Delta Police podcast.
Hear more about how police officers strengthen their resiliency through the power of story.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Bend, Don't Break podcast. And I am absolutely thrilled to be able to have Garry Foster with me and retired police chief Les Sylven from the Central Saanich Police Department, and now a PhD, earner. So, a doctor as well. So thrilled to have you both here. And this is going to be a really interesting conversation, a little bit different than how we usually do our conversations, but I still think hugely valuable for the first responders that are listening to the Bend, Don't Break podcast. So Garry, maybe I'll turn it over to you first and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation to be on the show. We've really appreciated this, Chief to Board. And thank you very much to Dr. Sylven for joining us. I really appreciate your expertise and your support. This is a very simple technique that's actually thousands of years old. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what meditation practices are, so I'm really hoping we can clarify some of that today. And it's a very simple, easy practice that anyone can learn, particularly very applicable for first responders, police, veterans, firefighters, anyone on the front line who experiences a significant amount of trauma. This is a fabulous program for reducing that stress. And it's a simple tool you can do for yourself. So counselors, psychologists love it. We have a lot of them recommending the program just because it really gives the individual self-sufficiency, and the benefits come right from the start.
Oh, I can't wait to hear more about it. And before we sort of start digging into it, I'm going to turn it over to you, Les, just to talk a little bit about where you're at now and a little bit of your journey here.
Yeah, sure. Delighted to be here. Absolutely delighted to be here with you, Chief, and with Garry again. We've connected on a few occasions here, and trying to bring this message of the importance of mental training and meditation, transcendental meditation, to first responders. So yeah, I have a little story I tell. I when I started policing in the late '80s. In the RCMP, and ended up at a little detachment, and I had just got there, and a couple other new recruits showed up, and they didn't have a fitness facility or a gym of any kind. So I remember we went up to the staff sergeant and said, "Hey, boss, can we get a little area where we can bring our own weights and our own stuff and make a little gym in the detachment?" And anyway, he ended up giving us a little file room, and so we made our little gym in there, and with our Sears weights, those old gold ones, and the little things that you bend. We brought our own stuff in there and created this gym. And then, stuff. Yeah, the Ben White. That's it. Exactly. Yeah. All that stuff. Yeah. The rubber bands and all those things that we did. But we were really excited about, or the need to stay healthy. And I remember back then that, even the sergeant of the day was saying, Sylven, why are you doing that? You only get so many breaths, why waste them exercising? And, some of these officers had begun, their service in the 50s, but fast forward, of course, even 10 years later, and you've got almost every first responder has got a gym of some type or access to, something to take care of your body. So it's not even questioned. So I feel like we're kind of in the 80s again, but of the mind here. And we're sort of bringing our little Sears weights, transcendental meditation, or, different types of meditation training, because we're starting to realize, and probably have for some time, but really the importance that we take care of not just our bodies, but we take care of our minds too. So I started transcendental meditation over 30 years ago, and I am convinced that, I got through my policing career because of it. It helped, no doubt. It was tremendously valuable to me. So I ended up going up to UVic here in Victoria 8 years ago or so with this question. How does this practice of meditation and mindfulness influence police leadership? And because I feel like it really was critical for me. But as they say, the best research is me search. So I was wondering, like, is there other people that feel the same? So that led me to this dissertation on exploring how how leaders in particular, believe this influences how they show up at work as police leaders. So that's kind of what's got me here. So I'm just happy to talk to anybody who will listen about, the value of taking care of our minds, and that's it.
Well,
Yeah.
you bring up a couple of great points, but before we get
Mm.
off and going, I remember very clearly going to several different locations with you for meetings, and you bringing your gi along to be
Oh,
able to practice judo at whatever you're going. So I know that you were a long supporter of judo, and are you still doing
yeah.
judo?
I still am, once a week.
I love it.
That old country and western song, though. You know, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was. So, so
Amazing.
yeah, it's still a practice that we engage. I do, and yeah, it's a bit of a rudder as well for me.
Good for you. Now, Gary, I'm going to come back to you, but we've just recently on our show had Dr. Mark Davies, who assists
Mm.
us here at the Delta Police Department. And Mark Davies is building a program for the Delta Police Department called Use of Force for the Mind. And it's the
Mhm.
whole idea of how we start preventative practices for the taking care of our mind, similar to how you've explained it, less for our bodies. So,
Yeah.
Gary, a little bit about sort of your experience in TM, I guess let's call it TM, going forward, and anything that around mindfulness. So I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, yeah, very excited to hear about that new program. It's very timely, as Leslie just said. We all have different experiences in our life, particularly in policing. As they say, once you see something, you can't unsee it. So every sort of encounter that we have creates an impression on the mind or the body. It's a stressful encounter. And under repeated exposure to trauma, it starts to influence those self-regulatory systems in the body. So then we get knee-jerk reactions to even the smallest event. And so underneath all this trauma and the storms and the clouds that we experience in our day-to-day life, just trying to live and pay our mortgage or do our job, there's a very quiet, silent depth to the mind. And so with Transcendental Meditation, the word transcend means to go beyond. So what we're doing is we're naturally and effortlessly, and this is really the key, experiencing those quieter levels of the mind where we get underneath all those storm clouds. And then what happens is people feel a great sense of inner peace, really deep relaxation, and then the body, those natural healing mechanisms come into play, and we start to notice things like, gee, I have more energy. I'm sleeping better at night. I'm getting along better with my spouse. I'm not having that knee-jerk reaction.
Mm.
And the real value here, I think, for veterans or police or first responders is that we're building resiliency. And we can go into the technical details of what's going on in the amygdala, but there's that sense of well-being and inner peace and silence comes as a side benefit of this simple 20-minute, twice-a-day practice we do anywhere with your eyes closed. So it really is a tool that you can use. I learned back in the late 70s. I've taught hundreds of people around the world when I've traveled and taught, and I'm absolutely amazed at how quick the benefits come. And I know what to expect because I'm an instructor. I've been teaching for 40 years. And some of the results come so quickly for people, it's really amazing. And it's because the human nervous system is incredibly intelligent. The doctor says, take 2 aspirins, call me in the morning. What he's saying is, hey, go home and get some rest, a good night's sleep, and then you'll
Mm.
start to feel better. But this is a much deeper level of rest, and research has shown that it's about twice as deep as sleep, and in just a few minutes. But in that really deep state of rest that the body gets, the mind has an increase in wakefulness, or what's called coherence at the frontal lobes of the brain. And people feel afterwards, wow, I feel a little more organized. I feel a little clearer. I'm able to make more effective decisions, more in-depth decisions. And that's all a side effect of the body becoming more resilient, becoming back into balance. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that research because some would say that it's a little bit woo, right? Some would
Sure.
I think those thoughts are past thoughts. from the 80s probably.
Right.
That people are concerned. But let's talk a little bit about the research. Maybe Les, over to you for a little bit of the research, and I'll come back to you, Garry.
Yeah, sure. This area that I've been playing around with for the last few years has been, in this area of what are the, it's more of a phenomenological or a qualitative exploration. So the group of commissioned officers that I was able to speak to for my study, for me, it was just a standpoint of them. It was, how do you believe your practice? And now this wasn't specifically transcendental meditation, but it was some did transcendental meditation, but it was meditation in general. But how do they believe this practice helps them in their practice of police leadership? So it has exploded like anything else, and it's one of the things they talk about. Meditation is the practice, and mindfulness can be the outcome. And there's a distinction between the two. And you don't need to practice meditation necessarily to be mindful, but it sure does help. But the idea in this study that I did was all of these officers were convinced that this is something that all police leaders, was their focus, need to do. They need to have a mental practice like transcendental meditation or something, whatever works for them, but something that is like a contemplative practice that allows you to, that you regularly undertake, that helps you to maintain a sense of calmness, better awareness, and concentration. So they, of course, and maybe it's a bit of a bias in the study. In fact, the dissertation defense I did last month, they kind of gave me a little bit of feedback that, there is a positivity bias that comes from people who self-select or people who agree to participate in a study. It's just kind of like a survey. Like if someone called you up and you really loved a product, you're likely to talk to the person. So they kind of, there is still, it's science, right? It's knowledge, and it takes years and years to really, get down to the point. But I think Garry will likely talk about, there's been a lot more research on just the technique of transcendental meditation. But I think we're building a pretty darn good case that this is not just from the experiences of individuals, but also from larger, like globally, like it is starting to be studied, of course, in the UK and all over the place, the US. So I think the bottom line though is that sort of, it helps with your job performance, it helps with your relationships, and it helps with your well-being, are the three big areas. Yeah.
No, you just can't. I'm going to put in the parking lot here for us to be able to talk whether it's proactive or reactive, but let's just put that in the parking lot. And Garry, I'll come back to you and be able to speak about sort of some of the research on TM.
Mm-hmm.
So please go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay, good. There's about 400 studies that are published, academic, peer-reviewed studies. And out of that, I'm just going to mention two very quickly. The first one, actually, the National Institutes of Health have awarded $30 million for hypertension research with TM. Very significant. It's about $1 million a year for 30 years. They wouldn't continue funding on that scale unless they were seeing in this longitudinal study some measurable outcomes that showed the benefit. So that's one. Department of Defense in U.S. funded a study about 4 years ago with 203 veterans randomly assigned to one of three programs: TM, health education, and prolonged exposure therapy. The results were published in Lancet Psychiatry a couple of years ago, which is the premier journal in psychiatry out of London. And here's what they found. The Department of Defense was trying to find out, is TM as effective in reducing PTSD as their gold standard? And their gold standard is this prolonged exposure therapy, where you repeatedly experience the original trauma till it doesn't bother you anymore. And if Les recalls, when we were giving a presentation at the station, I remember one of the officers standing up at the back and saying, "Whoa, I don't want to go through that again." And they don't like it. Police don't like it. The veterans don't like it. So what they did was they took 203 veterans, randomly assigned them to one of those three programs. And what they found was about 61% of the people in the TM group had reduction in PTSD symptoms. and prolonged exposure therapy was about 40%. So significantly more effective, but the researchers had to use the phrase, oh, TM is significantly non-inferior. Interesting choice of words, right? It says the same thing, but in different language. And health education, there was some benefits to that too. And I remember in a podcast discussing this with a veteran, and he said, I've been through all three of those programs. Let me tell you what it's like. If you've been experiencing some trauma, maybe as an officer or you see an accident on the side of the street, well, maybe you could sit with someone and repeat that trauma, and maybe it would help you neutralize the effect of it. But how do you take someone like a police officer or a veteran who's been deployed multiple times for many years? He said, I've seen hundreds of events. There's not time in my life to go through them all again. And he said, I hated that program. I got benefits from health education, exercise, diet, sleep better routine. But he said TM was so much more efficient and effective at it, and it was pleasant, and so that you're called to do it every day. It's just easy. It's simple to fit in. It's just so much less traumatic than being re-exposed to those original stressors.
So I'm going to come back to the question of whether it's proactive or reactive, but I'll put in the parking lot for the next question will be around some of the successes you've seen during your courses that you've taught and the people that you've worked with. So Les, do you think it's for proactive or reactive, or is it both?
Well, I definitely feel this is a proactive measure, transcendental meditation in particular. I mean, I'm kind of being a little silly here, but you wouldn't really have the time in the middle or after a call, a high intense call to sit for 20 minutes and you'll probably be too agitated. So this is the cardio that you do to get better at playing soccer. This is like the, it prepares you for the game. It's not the game.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I look. Some of the other types of meditation and mindfulness that they talk about, they might be a little more game appropriate. So we often, in Road to Mental Readiness, R2MR, we talk about the squared breathing, as a sort of 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, that type of stuff. That's just, it is like crisis in the moment type of thing to regulate yourself. And so my view, and I don't, Garry, we haven't talked about this, but my view of this is this is the cardio that I can do so I can play my game. It's not the game, but it's if I didn't have it, it would be, I would not be playing the game very well. And when I think about this again, back to this little study that I did and just how, of the 11, commissioned officers from across the country that I ended up with, there were the vast majority of them started their meditation training or mindfulness training because they were receiving therapy for PTSD or operational stress injuries. So I really believe, my analogy is think about exercise and think about this is exercise too for the mind. And so use that as kind of an analogy. And what I kind of felt after that hearing about that from these officers was, well, you wouldn't start exercising after you've had a heart attack. You start before. And so this is the same thing for this type of mental training. If it's possible to embed this into policing, transcendental meditation, whatever it works for people, that before they have experiences of great trauma that we all end up with, I just think it just makes a lot more sense.
Absolutely. Garry, any thoughts on that? And then talk a little bit about some of your success.
Sure, it's absolutely, you nailed it exactly, Les. Basic training is where we want to go. In fact, the Department of Defense said if we get the same results in this next study they're doing with 500 veterans in about a dozen VA hospitals in the US, they want to roll it out in basic training. And there's so many great stories I could tell, but I'll tell you one of, he was a SWAT officer I met in Atlanta, Georgia when I was traveling and teaching. And he came one day to the office to learn. He had all his gear on. He pulled up in his squad car. And he said, I'd heard that TM reduces anxiety. And he said, I'm really burning out. He said, when I get out of my car to go make an arrest at a home or serve a warrant, he said, I have all my gear on. I feel capable of handling whatever might come on. But he said, every step I take closer to the front door, he said, my anxiety levels are going through the roof. So I said, I think we can help you, Rick. Let's, you have nothing to lose. And so we sat down, went through the course of instruction, which is an hour and a half a day over 4 days. And I talked to him a couple of months later, and he said, a whole different world now. I get out of my car, I go to the home, I'm aware and alert to what might happen. I feel like I can handle it. But he said the anxiety is not there anymore. And it's exactly as Les was alluding to. It's prevention. You want the physiology to have that resilience. So when the traumatic event happens, you're handling it at much more of a cool cucumber, so to speak. That's really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And we were discussing earlier Constable Todd Mason over here in Vic PD, and he was on a podcast a couple of years ago and talking about the trauma of dealing with the street drugs and everything. And at the end of the show, the host asked him, how do you go home? How do you deal with this? You just can't switch it off like that. And he said, well, I'm practicing TM. I'm sleeping better. My anxiety has gone down. I just feel so much more in control and my mind is clearer. And that's really, really what it's all about. It's really a prevention program.
Garry, what does it look like to be able to be trained in it and then to actually do it?
Well, it's about 4 days, an hour and a half a day that you take the personal instruction. It's always one-on-one. Everybody learns at their own pace. So it's highly personalized for the individual. Benefits come right from the start. I usually hear two things on the first day of instruction. I can't believe how easy this is. And two is, wow, I can't believe how relaxed I feel. And that's a very common experience in meditation. So we also, with police and veterans, we're also doing a quick pre-test and a post-test so we can gauge sort of the anxiety levels and all that before someone learns. And then after they learn, they repeat the same tests again. It's an online questionnaire. And then the researchers compare the differences in the two. And in our case, for the Department of Defense, it goes back to Veterans Affairs Canada anonymously. And they can see, wow, yeah, there's some measurable changes here. And that's why they keep rolling out this grant that they've provided us with over the last few years. And
So actually, in individuals, the instruction is individual, and to actually do the TM, what does it take? A quiet space, I would imagine, and then what kind of timing?
it's 20 minutes twice a day. Ideally, we'd like to see them have space in the center in the police station to be able to do it, but we know we're not there yet. So they could do it at home before they come to the gym or to work or whatever. And then again at the end of the day. So you just need a chair. You need 20 minutes by yourself. And I when I travel, and Les could say this too, I've done it in the airport. I do it as a passenger on a plane, on a train, on the bus, wherever you can sit. It doesn't need to be pin drop silent. It's an easy technique to fit in anywhere. It's very, very easy to adopt. My wife's father was a judge here in BC, in your area, and he fit it in twice a day with an incredibly busy schedule. So sometimes those of us who are busier and have more demand on us really start to appreciate how nice it is to have a mental break. Right.
Just one more question before I go back to Les. Are people skeptical before they start?
Some do. I remember a drill sergeant turning to me. I can still see him. He was just scary to sit down beside him. And he turned to me and he said, "Don't think you're going to get through to me." And I just said, "I'll just follow the instructions here. Let's see how you do." And he came on very skeptical. And then I asked him afterwards, how the experience was. And there was a little glint in his eye and a little smile in the corner of his mouth. And I just started laughing. Works, doesn't it? Yeah. And he just said, yeah. So you can be skeptical. You don't need to be feeling like, oh, this is going to work for me because I'm going to be a better person or have a pre-interest in something like this. So skeptics, I was skeptic myself too. They're absolutely welcome. As long as you follow the procedure, benefits come.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Les, tell me what this means for policing and first responders.
I think the value that was the most impactful for me from the research that I did, and it's my own experience too, is how do we show up for the ones we love when we are finished our shift, our work, our whatever it is that we're engaged in? How are we able to be and that's the area that it has the most impact for me. Yeah, I see this as being tremendously helpful for people's ability to concentrate. It helps with people's conflict management, that ability to notice, and to think about what you're thinking about. And that's kind of what Garry was hinting about there. It's the fancy term is this metacognitive self-regulatory capacity. So being able to think about what you're thinking about and change a channel. And so this is what is grown significantly through this practice. So I that's what I think about. And actually, some of the people even told me, look, if you're trying to sell this stuff, just tell them, do you want to be a better dad? Do you want to be a better mom? Do you want your kids to like you? Do you want to not be a jerk all the time? Like these are the words of one of these senior officers who just said, I just really hope it goes on and expands and becomes something that all police officers undertake. And again, this transcendental meditation is my technique, and I've practiced it for 30 years. And kids have been trained. It is so gentle and so easy. And I think it's also important to recognize that there may be another avenue into this mindfulness for other people. It's kind of like we don't all, like, I'm a little shy of 5'9", a little south of that. So I don't play basketball, but I have my sport I love, right? I love my judo. And I feel that, there is something out there for everyone. This is probably the most accessible, transcendental meditation. And some people just say, I can't sit still. I can't, and so they'll maybe start with just some breathing or an app, or, the Mindful Badge, the group, they do tremendous work on this area as well. But I think that would be where I would, if anybody remembered what we talk about here today, it would be that, like, it's the impact that you have on those that you love the closest is really powerful. And I would say the last thing, well, probably not the last thing, but a lot of people go, oh my gosh, now I got to meditate. I got to get up at 4:00 in the morning because I got to do my cardio. I got to do my stretching. I got to journal. I got to write a poem, and then I got to meditate. I got all these things that people expect that I should be doing. And, but I found that this is kind of like brushing my teeth. Like if I skip it, if I don't, I start to feel pretty gross in a while. You can, and night shifts, day shifts, alternating between different times when I would practice, but I just think it's one of those things that just becomes second nature, and that's what I hope people remember.
Yeah, no, that's dynamite. Thank you. And quite frankly, Instagram tells us to do all that, doesn't it? Get up in the morning and to journal, and to have the perfect morning, and to have an evergreen shake, and on it goes, right? That's for sure. Garry, you were going to say something. My apologies.
Yeah, no. I always get so inspired when Les speaks because it just triggers up all these stories. I'll tell you a very quick story about a trial lawyer that I instructed. She said when she would come home from the courtroom, she would go to the front door of her house, and her 5-year-old daughter would run to meet her and open the door. What she would expect is a loving mother. What she got was an angry trial lawyer. So she said now, she goes, she sits in her office, takes her 20 minutes, decompresses, and then when she gets home, she's ready to work with her family the way that she should be as a loving mother. And, just as Constable Mason said, you've got to do something to turn that off. You've got to give yourself that break. Life is bigger than just our 9 to 5 or 5 to 9 job. It's our quality of life, right? It's very important.
Before I bring this to a conclusion, gentlemen, what would you say if someone wants to find out more information? What would they do for that? Garry, maybe you start.
Sure. They could reach out to us. I could leave you with my email. And then if you go online, particularly if you went to the Canadian Women's Wellness Initiative.ca, that's a lot. This is the organization, it's the registered charity in Canada that has received the grants from the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs, and you could reach the trained instructors through that website. Alternately, anywhere in the world, tm.org, tm.org. That site automatically is set up so that wherever you are in the world, it connects you with a trained instructor. So that's
Wonderful.
simple.
And you know what I'll do, Gary? Maybe you can just say what your email is as well. We'll put it in the show notes for everyone as well. But please, what
Sure.
would you email?
Yeah, it's Garry Foster 108 at gmail.com. And the trick in there is the Garry has two R's. So GARRY FOSTER 108 at gmail.com.
Great. Thank you for that. Les, anything to add on sort of how to think about mindfulness and how we can increase its exposure to everyone?
Yeah, I'm really one of the people that I've listened to their podcast, quite inspired by, is Dan Harris, and kind of quite famous for his on air sort of trouble that he had. And anyway, he's gone on to be a real advocate for meditation, and his book is called 10% Happier. And I just
Yes.
that kind of really just makes a lot of sense to me. There's no magic bullet in life. We're not going to be able to say this is the answer to everything that you'll ever have. But this idea of 10% happier, or thinking about it from the standpoint of others, I think that would be really valuable. If people were interested in this study that I just finished, I am a huge fan of the Journal of Community Safety and Wellbeing. And they've published a couple papers on it, and another one's coming out next month. And so if people were into that sort of from the academic standpoint of what that was about, it's a great organization and a great journal, and would really recommend people go there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Well, as we sort of bring this to a conclusion now, I want to sort of go to each of you and really understand what you'd like to leave people with from our 30 or 35 minutes here today. And very interested in sort of what the next step is for people, and what is the nugget you want to leave for the learning for them today. So Garry, you get to start.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me on the show and being able to do this. I would say reach out. There's no reason to suffer. If anyone's feeling uncomfortable, feeling overwhelmed by the trauma in their job or their life, try this. It's just a simple, easy thing that you can do for yourself. We've got lots of doctors recommending it now, psychologists. It's getting really good outside funding and support. 3 police departments here are learning it. I have 25 more officers waiting to learn. And just talk to somebody. Don't let the burden weigh you down. There's a way out of this for everybody.
Oh, thank you. Les.
I would just build on that and say it's never too late in your career. So I've been retired for a few years now, a couple of years from policing, and even still, I'm really surprised, having come out the other end, of how the career is still with me. And even, there's even some feelings of, without that constant pressure of being in the environment, without this kind of constructive coping that you get from your peers and the people you work with, once you're retired, sometimes you get, or I'll speak for myself, but I get some things that come back and are visiting me now, over the 30 some odd years that I was on the job. And I'm so grateful now in retirement to still have this practice. And so it's never, even if you're walking out the door, even you're walking into the JI or the police academy, or you're walking out, invest in yourself with this.
Oh, amazing messages. Thank you. Well, first of all, I can't thank you enough to be able to appreciate your expertise that you're bringing to this topic, the ability for you to be able to willingly share to everyone on TM and mindfulness overall, your research and expertise in the area certainly is very beneficial for everyone. And I know that there will be people listening today that will want to learn more about it. So I suspect that you will hear from people and they will check out the journal as well and be able to understand what the next step is in their journey of how they look after their mind as well as their other wellness issues, whether it be physical wellness or even spiritual wellness. So thank you
Yes.
so much. I'm grateful again for your participation, and I look forward to being able to learn more about TM as I get ready to go on my journey for meditation as well. So thank you.
Great.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure, and thank you for what you're doing, Chief.
Yes. Thank you both. Thank you both very much for
Yeah.
your line of duty, your service. Thank you.
Yeah.